Okay, in this video I want to cover the material that's from the appendix to chapter 4. Basically this is a quantitative chapter and it covers basic algebra, addition, subtraction, and essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to calculate the areas for consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the deadweight loss. So just to review the concept here of what we're doing. Right, in a PQ space with demand and supply, right, we would have our demand and supply function with a consumer surplus and a producer surplus. And then theoretically what we could do, right, is we could impose, let's say, a price floor. Right? Then, right, what would happen is that the producer surplus would now be this entire region right here. This would be the consumer surplus, and this would be the deadweight loss. Basically what chapter 4 is going to run us through is how to calculate each of these three areas and basically add numbers to this general picture. Okay, so I'm just going to make up a demand and a supply equation, and we're going to solve it out. Okay, so I've got my calculator already here. I did not figure this problem out already. I am just going to state the demand curve and the supply curve to be 100 minus 2p, the supply curve to be 21 plus 5p. Okay, so the first step is going to be to solve for the equilibrium. That involves setting these two equations equal to each other, finding the equilibrium price, and then finding the equilibrium quantity. Okay, I'm going to pause the video here while I solve for the equilibrium price and quantity. Theoretically, you could pause the video as well at this point. When it resumes, I'm going to show you my work. Okay, so what I did was, again, in this first step, solving for equilibrium. I set the two equations equal to each other. 79 equals 7p, so I'll isolate the p on one side, isolate the number on the other side, then solve for p. And then substitute this into either the demand curve or the supply curve. Pick whichever one. I would suggest you put it into both. You should get the same answer. And I get 77.43. Please check my math. I'm sure I could be wrong. At this point, then, right, the picture would look something like this. I would also suggest that you regularly draw the picture. Okay, 77.43, 11.29. Okay, so now the question would be, what happens when this equilibrium price can't hold? Okay, so let's set a price floor 13. Seems like a nice round number. All right, so we're going to set the price at 13 legally. So we're going to set the price up here. Okay. What we then need to do is we need to solve for the new consumer surplus, the producer surplus, and the deadweight loss. Okay. Before we do that, though, it's going to be helpful to calculate the consumer surplus and the producer surplus under equilibrium conditions. So, let me turn, here it is. Okay, so under these conditions, right, what I've got is I've got a quantity of 77.43, an equilibrium price of 11.29, and what I need to do is I need to solve for this area and I need to solve for this area. Okay, area of a triangle, 1/2 base times height. So for the consumer surplus, that's going to mean that I'm going to be needing to find the y-intercept for this point, right? Because then that's going to give me all the points I need for my triangle. And I'm going to need to find the y-intercept for the supply curve. Now, the way that we would find that is by substituting in 0 for the quantity into the demand curve, and substituting 0 into quantity into the supply curve. That will find us the intercept. Okay. So if we do that, if we look for the intercepts first, that would mean we'd have 0 equaling 100 minus 2p, which would mean 2p equals 100, p equals 50. So that would mean that this right here would equal 50, right? 1/2 base times height would be this entire area. Just to find that y-intercept, I substituted in 0 for the quantity into the demand curve, 100 minus 2p, solve for p. Okay, now let's find this price right here. That would mean then that I'm going to have 0 equaling 21 plus 5p, negative 5p equaling 21, p equaling negative 4.2. Now, this is going to happen from time to time, that the price might end up being a negative price. You have 1 to 2 choices at this point. You can either use what economists call the choke price, which is basically saying, let's just cut it off at 0, or what you can do is use this negative number. Either way is fine by me. Basically what we're saying here is that this intercept is actually below 0 right here. So I want to fix this picture up here. And I'm sorry, I'm already taking more than the 5 minutes I said I would. So now this is negative 4.2. I'm going to be the mathematician here and solve it with the negative 4.2. If you want to solve it with 0 as the price, that would be a choke price. Fine by me. Let's solve for the original consumer surplus now in the producer surplus. Okay. So for consumer surplus, 1/2 base times height, that would mean that consumer surplus is going to equal 1/2 times the base of this triangle. So the base of this consumer, whatever your perspective is for base, I don't care what your perspective is. But I'm going to have this be my base. So the base of this triangle is 77.43, the equilibrium quantity. Okay, so it's going to be 1/2 times 77.43 times the height of this triangle, which would be the difference between 50 and 11.29. Which is going to give me, with the dollar as the value here, is going to give me a total consumer surplus, if I figured it out correctly, of $1498.66. That would be this area right here, this entire triangle. Consumers received, as an aggregate, about $1,500 in surplus. They would have been willing to pay $1,500 more as a group, but they didn't have to. They only had to pay the equilibrium price. As for the producer surplus, also equaling 1/2 base times height, it's going to equal, and again I'm going to use the negative 4.2. The base of this triangle is going to be the same, 77.43. And now I'm going to have 11.29 minus negative 4.2. And let's see what we get here. I get 599.70. So I did 1/2 base, 77.43, times the height of the triangle, which would be the difference between 11.29 and negative 4.2. Minus a negative, so it becomes a positive. Producers received almost $600 more than the minimum amount they would have been willing to receive. Okay, so that's the consumer and producer surplus under equilibrium. Now, let's look at what it's going to be with this price floor that I've imposed of $13. Okay, so I'm going to redraw the picture here. So that's a little bit smaller. Now you can hear the bell ringing. Okay. So our picture now looks like this. And so theoretically now what I need to do is this is my consumer surplus. This is my consumer surplus is this upper triangle,